Nintendo is diving into the future. 2024 looks to be the start of a new Nintendo generation. What can we expect?
Here we go.
A really long time ago, Iwata said that a race for photorealism, a race for the most powerful system, is really a race to the bottom. And what did he mean by that? Well, it's taken me a while to figure that out. And I think if you're a bit older and you've been playing video games for a long time, you kind of get what he means. The idea of chasing a spec or making the most powerful piece of hardware in any generation that you're in just leads to the idea of, once you get to that magical photorealistic moment, there's nowhere else to go. If you don't have creatives, if you don't have a vision, if you can't be whimsical and childlike and create fantasy worlds to explore, what's the point of creating anything? You could just walk outside and say, wow, this is a realistic looking video game. And I think that Nintendo has managed to create their own market. And no matter what happens in the future, no matter where the video game industry decides to go or pushes towards, Nintendo has created this niche market that's really large, and it's all their own. Even if, let's say, 20 or 30 years from now, we're all just streaming video games to some holographic display, people are still going to be willing to go out and expect to buy a toy to put under their television called a Nintendo something, because the consumer isn't going to change when it comes to what Nintendo is offering. That's really the key. That's really the magic to their success. So you look at the showcase they just had, and it's almost like people were expecting the Switch to just sort of die out. It has been forever since it's been on the market. What could they possibly do? What could they possibly create to inject life into this old system? And then they show things like Super Mario Wonder, or the Super Mario RPG Remake, Pikmin 4. These games are going to just inject so much fun and life into the Switch, and the audience is going to eat them up. Now, you might say, well, the Switch and these games aren't for me, but what you can't discount is that it is for a whole lot of people, and all of those people are buying PlayStations and Xboxes and talking about the future, but they're still willing to stay with Nintendo and spend money with whatever Nintendo decides to do within any generation. And that continues to buck the trend of the future and cloud streaming and games everywhere, and nobody wants a box under their television. It's an old way to do things. Well, if that happens, folks, I have news for you. Nintendo will still be Nintendo, and a box will still be there. That's the magic of what they do. They've created that market for themselves. Now, that might be a plus. It could also be a minus. A lot of third parties don't want to put their games on the Switch, even if they could, because they have to compete with these Nintendo first-party titles, and that's a difficult sell. However, we do have news now that Nintendo is carrying the Nintendo accounts over to whatever the next Switch is, which is something they haven't done in the past. So all of your digital purchases, your account will carry over to the next system, which is fantastic, which hints at the idea of a backwards compatible Switch 2. And while we're calling it Switch 2, I've heard from some quote-unquote sources that Nintendo is very keen to keep that Switch moniker and that snapping the figures during the promotion Switch marketing motif going, and the next Switch may simply be called Switch 2. I'm hearing Switch Next. I even heard Switch On or Switch Up, but I'm thinking that they're going to go with PlayStation, Xbox, iPhone model. Just call it a Switch from now on. The next one will be Switch 2. The next one will be Switch 3. I think that's the safest bet when you carry everything forward. Again, it will be a hybrid system. In terms of specs, I'm hearing much less powerful than the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox Series X, but somewhere around an Xbox Series S, or slightly, just slightly beneath that. And that, folks, bodes well for Nintendo, and it may bode well for some third parties to get some more support on that Nintendo platform. But again, that problem of competing with Mario and Zelda and Pikmin and everything else that Nintendo puts out there is very difficult for third parties to swallow. Again, if you've been around a while, you know Nintendo's strategy is to take existing technology that's incredibly old and well-tested and now cheap and do something completely different with it. So the idea of getting the latest screaming processor or GPU in a Switch 2 is completely off the table, but some of the technology that's been around for a while now, for instance, the Xbox Series X or even the Xbox Series S that I mentioned before, that technology becomes much cheaper and it's been tested. Nintendo could take that technology and do something completely different with the Switch 2. Now, we know it's going to be a hybrid system, just like the Switch, but what else could be implemented in the Switch to give it that Nintendo DNA? Now, I've heard a lot of Nintendo fans talk about the 3DS and taking that technology and putting it into the screen of the new Switch. I don't think that's going to happen. I think just the idea of a Switch, the idea of a hybrid system, the television, the dock, taking it with you, that's going to be refined. I think that hook, that Nintendo hook, is enough going forward when it comes to a Switch 2 or a Switch 3 or whatever they decide to call it going forward. I think just a simple upgrade in technology, maybe a slight increase in resolution, and maybe some more graphical techniques that allow those third parties to bring some more games over, and also allow Nintendo first party to do things that they haven't been able to do before and open up a whole new world of creativity, which is what we're all buying these systems for, or what we should be buying these systems for. Ultimately, it's an exciting time. I love the idea of technology moving forward, and I like the idea of these amazing systems like the PlayStation 5, the Xbox Series X, and all of these games getting more complicated and more graphically impressive. However, at the end of the day, I'm always drawn back to what Nintendo is doing, and like so many other people, whatever it is they do, I always find it so much more compelling because of the simplistic nature of just fun, of just putting a game in a system and having a great time with it, and you forget about things like what's the resolution, what's the frame rate, and you're just sucked into these fantasy worlds and you appreciate all the characters and the colors and the fun, and that's ultimately what it's all about. And I think that's why they continue every single generation to not only innovate, not only do things differently, and maybe seen as a toy by more mature, quote-unquote mature gamers. However, they're consistently making sure that they're able to do what it is they do. And even when they have something like a Wii U failure, the system before being a success carries them through. Ultimately, they're only competing with themselves, and that's what I like about them. They're not competing with a trend or somebody else. They're trying to outdo themselves creatively. I appreciate that. Exciting times. Switch 2 is coming. What do you think the Switch 2 will be? What do you think it has to have versus what maybe you'd be okay with leaving behind? Let me know in the comments section below. Please think about the like button and subscribing to this channel, and I'll see you in the next video.